Welcome back to the thrilling crime-solving journey of Xu Qi'an in the Nightwatcher. Chapter 32. Untitled. Xu Tian felt a wave of emotion wash over him, a culmination of 20 years spent negotiating and mediating. Though his wife remained indifferent to their little granddaughter, the bond among the children was strong and vibrant. He held the small girl close, soothing her gently. Ning Yan has gone outside now. The trouble is over. Xu Lingyue, skeptical, stared at her uncle for reassurance. It's just a trivial matter, Xu Tian said casually. With her brother's confident words, Xu Lingyue began to feel at ease. All her brother had to do was speak, and she found herself believing instantly. His pride wouldn't allow him to lie about significant issues. Just then, the magistrate of Chu County hurried over, distressed and curious about the unfolding situation. How did you manage to address the issue with young Master Chu? His eyes widened with incredulity. Unless Chu himself had decided to drop the matter, he couldn't fathom how things had smoothed over. I called for my teacher, Xu Tian replied. At this, the magistrate suddenly understood, though doubt lingered in his mind. The most esteemed members of the court hailed from the national school, and the rivalry between the national school and the Cloud Book Pavilion was well known. Even if Xu Tian's teacher was a great scholar, there was no way the minister could simply let this slide without cause for concern. The influence of the national scholar from the Cloud Book Pavilion wasn't sufficient to resolve matters this easily. And also Mr. Mo Bai, Xu Tian added, and the scholar from the Heavenly Archive. What? The magistrate's eyes widened, his demeanor shifting to one of seriousness. A tiger's cub can't be a dog. Truly, a tiger's cub can't be a dog. Congratulations, Lord Xu. Your son is not only admired by the Cloud Book Pavilion but also has connections with the Heavenly Archive scholar. His future is boundless. With a son like that, how could I not feel envious? Xu Lingyu's heart soared at the knowledge that her brother was acquainted with the scholar from the Heavenly Archive. A sense of safety wrapped around her like a comforting cloak. For most women, home was where they relied on their fathers or brothers until they found their husbands. Xu Tian was both a brother and a protector. He shook his head. Mr. Mo Bai didn't come because of me. It's connected to my elder brother. I'm not familiar with the Heavenly Archive scholar, either. He was invited by my older brother. When had Xu Yan come to know the eminent scholar Li Mo Bai from the Cloud Book Pavilion? Perhaps this was something Xu Tian had facilitated. But how could the Heavenly Archive scholar possibly be acquainted with someone as inconspicuous as he? The magistrate stood in stunned silence, his mind racing with disbelief. Xu Yan had worked under him for years and had always been a near-invisible figure. Quiet and unassuming. His relationships with his peers were amicable but far from intimate. He had no exceptional abilities beyond his aptitude for fighting. Lately, he had become noticeably more clever and social, bantering with the guards and sharing drinks with colleagues, but still not someone likely to attract the attention of a renowned scholar or the Heavenly Archive. If this is true, Xu Yan's identity and status must have changed dramatically. Even I should be more courteous towards him. I'll have to wait until he reports tomorrow, and then I can probe the truth of this matter, the magistrate silently resolved. Xu Lingyue could hardly believe what she was hearing. It was as if she was lost in a dream. Was it that poem? Had her elder brother written a farewell poem that garnered praise from the scholar and led to his offer of assistance in resolving the situation? But how? She wondered. Did someone tied to the Heavenly Archive come to know her eldest brother? Each revelation only deepened the intrigue surrounding him. Xu Qi'an followed Song Qing down a dimly lit corridor where beams of soft light streamed through the wall openings, illuminating their path. The absence of windows in the Azure Pavilion left Xu Qi'an sighing inwardly at the missed opportunity for a view of the scenery outside. Before long, They entered a hidden chamber. Song Qing unlocked the door with a key and lit the candles inside. The room was filled with all manner of peculiar artifacts, some resembling weapons, while others were entirely unrecognizable. As Xu Qi'an meandered through the collection, absorbed in each item, he suddenly froze at the sight of something that startled him. What is this? It was an enormous glass jar, within which floated a creature unlike any he had seen. It bore a resemblance to a cat but was adorned with wooden patterns that resembled bark. And there was even a wooden hump protruding from its belly. Xu Qi'an stared in horror as the creature, still alive, gently pulsed as if it were breathing. This is a great experiment, Song Qing said gravely. Its essence is that of a cat, but I've been trying to fuse it with wood, to grant it the ability to regenerate. In fact, I was on the verge of success. If you sever its head, it will grow back within 3 days. The only drawback is its heart. Yet I failed in making it completely sentient. Now it merely exists as a plant, lifeless and thoughtless, capable only of being nourished in water. What the hell? Are you some kind of monster? Xu Qi'an observed the gleam in Song Qing's eyes with a mixture of awe and disbelief. How do you find my idea? Song Qing asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. Noticing Xu Qi'an's troubled expression, he furrowed his brows, disappointment creeping in. You think it has problems? Xu Qi'an maintained his stoic expression, shaking his head. I merely think you might be straying from your path. I've contemplated areas of alchemical practice too, though I prefer to call it hybridization. Hybridization, Song Qing repeated, considering the term as his eyes brightened with intrigue. We should start small, experimenting with more familiar organisms. For instance, crossbreeding 2 different feline species to create something entirely new. Create a new species? What kind of species? Song Qing pressed eagerly. I don't know. It could be an entirely new kind. Better or perhaps worse, Xu Qi'an said. But that's the allure of alchemy, isn't it? You just mentioned alchemy. You said this is alchemy? Song Qing exclaimed with enthusiasm. What's the matter? Xu Qi'an felt a wave of concern sweep over him, questioning if he had misspoken. I believe alchemy shouldn't be limited to lifeless objects but encompass all forms of life. So I attempted to transform this cat, but the master disapproved, insisting that life lay outside the realm of alchemy. I've been detained for a long time for it. Truly a wise master, Xu Qi'an chuckled awkwardly, responding, whether it is right or wrong, only time will tell. After a pause, he added, if you intend to challenge the master without suffering consequences, I have a suggestion. Tell me, Song Qing urged, eager for insight. You should start with plants, Xu Qi'an advised. Plants have life too, but their nature is far less complex. I've seen alchemical texts that coincide with your ideas. He suddenly fell silent. Keep going, Song Qing exclaimed, feeling the tension mounting, his wide eyes pleading for more. Song Qing, these trinkets you have here are impressive, Xu Qi'an mentioned. The foundational principles of alchemy. I understand. I'll offer you 3 gifts. Given your current cultivation realm in the refining essence stage, I believe they will suit you well. Song Qing quickly grasped Xu Qi'an's intention. He was not averse to the concept of an equitable exchange. In fact, he was quite pleased with it. The material for this crossbow was something I accidentally refined. It's stronger than regular iron and far more flexible, but due to the complexities of its creation, mass production is unfeasible. The bowstring is made from a blend of spider silk from the 6-eyed, venomous spiders of the southern territories and silk from rainbow silkworms. In ambush situations, it can pierce the protective aura of those in the refining chi stage unless they're at the top of that stage. The most valuable aspect is that this military crossbow is engraved with a formation spell that amplifies the power of its arrows, threatening masters in the spirit refinement stage. However, it can be used only 3 times before the spell dissipates. Xu Qi'an gasped. Is this a magical weapon? Chapter 33. I charge into the tempest of battle. He had always known that magical artifacts existed. His uncle had told him stories of the legendary weapons that had turned the tide during the Great Phoenix's conquest at the mountain sea pass. The power of these weapons came, in part, from explosive materials, but even more from intricate formations embedded within them. Magical artifacts were the crown jewels of the Great Phoenix dynasty, bolstering its claim as the legitimate ruler of the realm. It was at this moment that Xu Qi'an suddenly realized the deep connection between these artifacts and the Tai Tian Jian, the administrative body that oversaw their use. Tong Kan hesitated for a moment before responding to Xu Qi'an's inquiry. Employing a principle he deemed foundational, "It's not a secret at all. Do you know what a 4th-tier mage is called?" Xu Qi'an shook his head, baffled. "I don't even know the classification of my own martial path beyond the 6th tier. A formation master," Tong Kan declared. "Any item crafted by a metallurgist is simply a mundane object. Once a formation master etches a formation onto it, it becomes a magical artifact." As the pieces fell into place, Xu Qi'an contemplated the structure of mages, enlightened by the snippets of knowledge provided by the captivating Kai Wei. He began to understand the hierarchy better. A 9th-tier apothecary was a prerequisite for aspiring 8th-tier qi masters. These, in turn, led to the 7th-tier feng shui masters. Curiously, the feng shui masters had no direct connection to their next level, the 6th-tier metallurgists. So, the metallurgists and the 4th-tier formation masters supported each other's crafts. Metallurgists created powerful weapons, and formation masters transformed them into magical artifacts. The intricate hierarchy of mages was indeed fascinating. No wonder the esteemed Grand Elder held such a prestigious position within the Great Phoenix dynasty. Xu Qi'an felt a sudden surge of determination. He had to win over Kai Wei. Not for ulterior motives, but simply to seek a genuine love in a society that often felt cold and indifferent. The second item is the heart-guarding mirror, Tong Kan continued. It's also a magical artifact, made from common materials. However, the engraved formations can withstand a full-on attack from a Qi master up to 6 times, and 3 strikes from a spirit master. It can resist 1 blow from a flesh and bone master. Flesh and bone master. So that's what tier 6 is in my martial system. Xu Qi'an finally grasped the classification of tiers. The last item is called bone-crushing arrow poison. When applied to an arrow, it can threaten the life of a spirit master. The flesh and bone masters are immune since the arrows can't pierce their skin. Xu Qi'an nodded thoughtfully. I find all 3 items quite appealing. After a brief pause, he added, this metalworking technique is called branch grafting. As he recounted the branch grafting technique from what details he remembered, his explanation was refreshing. He gave a thorough description of its benefits, such as increasing a plant's resistance to cold, drought, and pests, while also enhancing the sweetness of its fruit. It mirrored the enrichment experiments he had conducted days earlier. While his theoretical knowledge was extensive, practical skills were severely lacking. But that was fine. He had no intention of doing the actual experiments anyway. If Tong Kan failed, it would be blamed on his lack of skill. If he succeeded, all the credit would go to Xu Qi'an. After hearing the details, Tong Kan felt buoyed with excitement, gesturing enthusiastically as if he could dash off at any moment to embark on this grand metallurgical experiment. The Divine Tome. It truly is the Divine Tome. I can't believe there's a classic metallurgical text in existence. And yet I was unaware. Tong Kan exclaimed, his voice swelling with passion. Xu Qi'an walked gracefully down from the high tower, cradling the 3 magical artifacts, treasures that could not be measured in mere coins. I could use one to open the sky gate in the black market, but these items are too valuable to part with. Indeed, the joy of receiving free treasures is a timeless happiness for humanity. Perhaps tomorrow I'll go fishing and listen to some tunes instead. He had no need for even a single coin from Tianjian. But if he were to convert his newfound treasures into silver, he could easily win over his dismissive aunt. She would be forced to lower her head in submission, free from her mocking words. Imagining the prospect of flaunting his wealth in front of her, Xu Qi'an felt a thrill of exhilaration coursing through him. Into the storm of battle I charge, consumed by an insatiable desire to unify the realm. I gazed toward the heavens, clouds swirling in every direction. With my sword in hand, who among them can claim the title of hero? He belted out the verses of an epic from his previous life. But as he rounded a corner, he suddenly encountered a trio of unfamiliar faces. His song faltered, and he stepped aside, feeling a flush of embarrassment creeping over him. At the bottom of the stairway stood 3 figures. The man in the center wore a deep blue robe. His silver-streaked sideburns gave him an air of dignified refinement. His eyes deep and tranquil like a still lake. He exuded a timeless elegance that would induce gasps from young maidens. To his left stood a sullen youth, his gaze straight and attentive, brimming with caution. To his right was a more flamboyant individual, whose smirk revealed a mischievous quality that unsettled Xu Qi'an. Despite his discomfort, the delicate beauty of the flamboyant young man was striking. He could easily rival Xu Tan at home. As the group passed him, the young man shot Xu Qi'an a sly glance, carrying a hint of disdain. In that moment, Xu Qi'an felt the weight of a derisive stare, causing him to unconsciously hold his breath, his heart racing. They made their ascent up the stairs, disappearing from sight around the bend, leaving Xu Qi'an feeling somewhat relieved. Seems like that guy looked down on me. Perhaps my bravado was a bit too much. Well, he thought, he ought to be careful from now on. No more wild boasts, especially in public places. Like saying, I want to see the heavens blind to my vision, the earth incapable of burying my heart, desiring the Buddhas to turn to smoke. Or, for the sake of sacrificing my lofty ideals, I dare to teach the sun and moon to change the heavens. On the 7th floor, his junior brother reported back, and Tong Kan awaited the 3 guests at the top of the stairs. Kai Wei leaned casually against the wall, chewing on a piece of sugarcane, seemingly disinterested. As the trio arrived, Tong Kan clasped his hands in greeting. Lord Guy. The middle-aged man with the silver-streaked hair nodded gently. Lord Guy, the elder drank too much and is still napping. Please wait a moment. The stern young man remained stoic, while the flamboyant one frowned. The middle-aged gentleman, unaffected by their demeanor, followed Tong Kan into the tea room, casually mentioning, I happened to encounter an interesting young man on my way up. He doesn't appear to be a disciple of Tianjian. Kai Wei opened her mouth to interject, but Tong Kan silenced her with a glance, grinning as he replied, Oh, just a minor character, but indeed, he's quite intriguing. With the fearsome reputation of Da Gun Nian echoing in the halls, neither civil nor military official would need a solid reason to make their point. Tong Kan was unsure if Xu Qi'an had unwittingly crossed paths with the powerful eunuch during his fleeting moments of bravado. Interesting, you say? The middle-aged gentleman smiled, his demeanor still composed. How so? Tong Kan paused to consider before commenting. A genius, a metallurgical prodigy. If he hadn't wandered off the beaten path, should he join Tianjian, history would remember his name. His words held no malice yet subtly suggested that Tianjian valued Xu Qi'an's potential. The flamboyant young man chuckled coldly, while the older gentleman maintained his calm smile. nodding slightly. In the inner courtyard of the Xu household, Xu Qi'an's aunt, accompanied by several older maid servants, busily cut fabric, stitched garments, and stuffed cotton, preparing winter clothing for the family. As the weather grew colder, she resolved to make several sets of winter attire for her children and husband. Luke Na, finishing the last stitch, bit through the thread with her small teeth, admiring the delicately embroidered lotus blossoms. She reflected on how adorable Xu Lingyan would look in her new outfit. "Madam, I went to find Dai Lang yesterday, and he still doesn't have any winter clothes. He's wearing fall garments," Luke Na whispered. Xu Qi'an's aunt shot a glare at her closest maid, a haughty scoff escaping her lips. "What are you trying to say?" Luke Na lowered her head, murmuring, "Maybe we should make a set for Dai Lang too." "Dream on," the aunt huffed. "That brat would stab me in the back at the first chance. You think I'd make clothes for him? Not a chance." The other older maid servants worked in silence, pretending not to hear any of this. "He comes over to Mooch office every day, yet he won't even contribute a shred. Most of the rice Dai Lang brings in goes straight to the household anyway," Luke Na retorted quietly. "With his appetite, even that is only barely enough to feed him," Xu Qi'an's aunt replied dismissively, her beautiful eyes rolling in disdain. "That ungrateful nephew. He once saved the entire family's lives, and mending fences wasn't off the table. However, he always found a way to needle her, as if a day without irritating her meant he couldn't enjoy his meal. A wolf travels 1,000 miles, still eats meat. A dog travels 1,000 miles, still digs through waste." An old phrase rang true. Just then, the steward burst in, exclaiming in a loud voice from the courtyard, "Madam, the master has returned."
Thanks for listening till the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter.